Hi everybody, TJ Mack and Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here, and thank you for indulging me as I put out one more video coming out of this weekend. I was hoping to have to put this video out later in the year, or maybe if things went better than expected, next year, but that is not the case. Yesterday I watched the Cowboys and Packers game with my two sons. Now as Cowboys fans, it obviously did not go the way we want, but I'm disappointed especially for my youngest son, who is 10. This is the first year where he's become a passionate fan of sports in the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, I'm to blame for that, growing up a Cowboys fan myself. Now, my oldest son already knows the trials and tribulations of passionately following your team, and now my youngest son is experiencing the same. Now, the first thing we need to do is give a lot of credit to the Packers because they played a heck of a game, and they certainly deserve to win. Now, if you watch my channel regularly, you know, part of my collecting focus is on the highs and lows of the teams I root for. I even have a row in a display case in my card room depicting what I call the villains of my youth. Well, one of the groups of villains that particularly stands out is the '85 Chicago Bears. Now, here are some of the cards I have from that group. You have here the 1985 Topps Mike Singletary, the 81 Topps Dan Hampton, 85 Topps Richard Dent, and a 76 Topps Walter Payton. Now, with all due respect to my friend Brian at Bear Cards 34, I could not stand that team because of what they did to my beloved Cowboys on November 17, 1985. Now, I remember the game well because it felt different than any Cowboys game I ever watched up to that point. Sure, they lost games in the past, but I never saw them get demolished from the opening kickoff to the final whistle. It felt like one of the popular movies released around that time, Rocky IV, where Ivan Drago destroys and ultimately kills the American hero, Apollo Creed, just as those big bad Chicago Bears slayed America's team. Now, to top it off, it happened on the Cowboys field. This Sports Illustrated cover says it all, 44-0. To this day, it's the biggest margin of defeat in Cowboys history. And even though I didn't know it, the winning tradition that I knew was about to end. Even though the Cowboys somehow made the playoffs in 1985, they were shut out by the Rams 20-0, behind Eric Dickerson's 248 yards rushing. It was the end of a reign of success that lasted for 20 straight winning seasons. On that day in November, the empire began to crumble, only I didn't know how bad it was going to be. My father grew up a Yankees fan, and I gained my love of the team from him, just as my sons like the Cowboys because of me. Now, recently I picked up this 1963 Yankees yearbook because the cover is interesting and it resonates with me. I am not a yearbook collector. In fact, this is the only vintage one I own. I've been searching for a nice copy of this yearbook for several months, and I finally found one. I bought it at the same time I purchased the 1981 Topps Danny White that I showed in my last video. What drew me in is this wonderful Willard Mullen illustration. Now, Mullen is a famous cartoonist who is best known for doing the yearbook covers for the New York Giants and Brooklyn Dodgers. In 1937, he created the famous Brooklyn Bum that became the symbol of the Brooklyn Dodgers until he departed for LA in 1957. What I love about this cover is the way the Yankees and their opponents are depicted. In the foreground, you have this exaggerated figure of a large, muscular player clad in the famed pinstripes. His shoulders are disproportionately large to signify the power and strength of the Yankees dynasty. He's holding 3 bats with the barrels prominently pointed at the viewer with the resume of a champion. 27 American League pennants, 20 World Series, all since just 1921. His head is turned with his eyes fixated on a quivering pitcher with his back to him, but the pitcher's head is facing him as he rubs the ball. You can see the rosin bag down below him. He's trying to figure out how he's going to face this behemoth that is dominating the game. What a polarizing cover. If you were a Yankees fan in 1963, you celebrated this. If you are a Yankee hater, it likely drove you crazy. Now, even though I'm a Yankee fan, I find this cover to be the height of the Yankees' arrogance, as it was a precursor to the long, hard fall that was about to come upon them. Now, this Bomber's Best card has meaning to me on many levels, one of which I talked about previously is that it was the first card I ever purchased with Mickey Mantle on it. I bought it for $20 at a yard sale in the late 80s. What is also interesting about this card is it states Bomber's Best. Well, we're soon to find out that their best wasn't good enough anymore. In 1963, they were swept by the Dodgers in the World Series behind the dominance of the Dodgers pitching led by Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale. In 1964, they were a team whose stars were aging and they were increasingly leaning on their young talent. While they made the World Series again and managed to hang on with the Cardinals, they fell in 7 games. After that, they didn't get another World Series for 12 years. Part of that was due to injuries to their young core of talented players, symbolized on this card by Tom Tresh. Then you have Mickey Mantle, who after 1964 was still a good player, but due to injuries was no longer a superstar. And the other player pictured here, Bobby Richardson, and his fellow teammate Tony Kubek, were 2 solid and sometimes spectacular stars, but unfortunately they both retired relatively young. When I see this cover, I think of my dad, because he would have been about 15 years old when this came out, and he lived to see the fall of an empire, just as I did with the Cowboys in 1985. That is what these 2 covers that I show today symbolize to me. Now, to my youngest son, Joe, who is just beginning his fandom, there will be some dark days like yesterday where you feel down in the dumps, but you'll get over it. Always remember it's important to stick with your teams through thick or thin, for the teams we root for are part of our identity. They give us a sense of belonging, a camaraderie with other like-minded fans. It's also great for us to connect as a family and to have something to carry on through the generations. This Cowboys magazine that I showed today will be yours someday, and the Yankees one will go to your brother. Hopefully these will serve as reminders that even when our team is at its worst, it's going to eventually get better. For that is our eternal hope as sports fans. Also, it's important to remember when things aren't going great, it will always not be that way. So celebrate success and stay humble. Don't fall into the trap of the 63 Yankees. Now, I'd love to hear if any of you have any disappointing moments you had as sports fans, and please feel free to share them in the comments. And this Friday, I plan on doing another video where I'm going to showcase some of the key cards that I've built over the last 20-so years of my collecting, which is really the core of a lot of my collection that I've built over the years. But until then, everybody have a great week.